Greetings, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of Roll the Dice with Dave. I'm actually on location in my office for the first time ever. So I started this when the pandemic hit, and I had been doing it from home. And today is the first time I'm doing it from my office. So I'm really excited about today. Those of you that are tuning in, please don't forget to like and share. You can get all Roll the Dice with Dave content on Facebook and YouTube. You could also subscribe to get updates on everything that is going on as far as my guests, who they are, and all the different topics that we have going on. And today I'm really excited. I am catching up with somebody that I met a long time ago, somebody who is in my circle of individuals that I use as a gauge of, am I doing things right? This individual is one of the most influential people I have ever met, and I have so much love and respect for her. So without further hesitation, I am going to go ahead and bring out my guest, Dr. Wanda Costen. Wanda, how are you doing today?
So great to see you, Dave.
It's so good. It's so good to see you. So I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself, but I was doing something in preparation for this show that I haven't really done with a lot of my other guests, and I was trying to figure out when we actually first met. I was sitting there going back, and I want to say our paths crossed at maybe a graduate conference. I think you were a faculty member. I think I was still an undergrad, maybe at the University of South Carolina, and it may have been in Las Vegas, Nevada.
That might have been the first time. The time I remember was a Southeast Creek conference.
Okay, I remember meeting you at a Southeast Creek conference as well.
But yeah, it could have been at UNLV. That would go even longer. That's pretty amazing.
So I think that takes us like into the late 90s, maybe early 2000s.
Early 2000s. I got to UNLV in 2001.
So that was it. That was it, because I remember I was just getting ready to start my master's program. I was finishing up my master's, getting ready to jump into a PhD program around that time. So I was finishing up my master's at South Carolina, went to a grad conference, thanks to, I think, a mutual friend of ours, Steve Morse.
Yes.
May he rest in peace. I tell you, I know, right? Yes. You know, and who would have thought, and I'll say this because people nowadays have gotten so caught up with who is associated with who, but I'll say, who would have thought that a Puerto Rican kid from the projects in New York would have grown up to befriend somebody from the woods of Georgia, right?
Exactly.
A self-proclaimed redneck. Steve used to say it all the time. He's like, I'm a redneck. But he was somebody that I trusted and was in my trusted 10 that I trusted so much. So, okay, that helps me, because I was sitting there trying to track it. I hate to say it, I was stalking your LinkedIn. I was like, man, where could it have been that we possibly met? But I want to go ahead and turn it over to you. Do you mind just introducing yourself, letting the audience know who you are and a little bit about what makes Dr. Wanda Costen, Dr. Wanda Costen?
Well, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. First of all, personally, just to catch up again to your point, we've gone several different pathways. For those who don't know, I have the distinguished honor of serving as the Dean of the Smith School of Business here at Queen's University, which is in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. And I came to Canada in 2016 and spent 3.5 years as the Dean of the McEwen School of Business in Edmonton, Alberta. So quite a different experience for me here, even in Canada, in two different provinces that are quite distinct. Interestingly, Canada just wrapped up its federal election last night, so that was a lot of fun for us up here as well. But to Dave's point, I think what's important for people to understand is the circuitous route I've taken to get to where I am. I tell folks all the time, especially students, this is my third career, so you have to follow your passion. I'm a West Point grad. Believe it or not, I was born in New York. My mom is a diehard New Yorker. My grandmother, I used to visit my grandmother in the Bronx, the South Bronx. So I know very much New Yorkers. Technically, I'm one, but my mom is a legitimate New Yorker, as is my brother. And I'm a West Point graduate, so most people might find that a bit interesting. I'm actually in the 7th class of women. I'm a graduate of 1986. So that's a distinct experience as well. And then I spent about a decade in industry, the last of which was in human resources for Aramark. And that's how I got into my passion and love for hospitality. And then decided for some strange reason in my early 30s to pursue my PhD. And I've had a lovely career moving into leadership probably about 7-8 years ago, I think now. at NAU, Northern Arizona University. And so just following my heart, and as you know, Dave, what's most important to me is impact. I take opportunities that allow me to have a positive impact. I'm deeply passionate, and some might say a little brash, about my commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And in Canada, because this is so important, indigeneity as well. So I'm really happy to connect with you and open to whatever we're going to chat about today.
And you used a word that some people say brash. And I think that was probably the thing that drew me to you as an individual. Was I was like, what you see is what you get, and you get no BS with Wanda, right? And I think that was one of the things that I truly appreciated, being a New Yorker, and also having the parents I have. My parents, my dad and mom, were both always very honest. If we were doing something great, they were very honest to praise the greatness. But if we were doing things that weren't so great, they were very honest about that as well. And they always laid it out, and they said, hey, this is what you're doing good. This is what you could improve on. So I think I always appreciated that, because you were always, hey, this is good, but you could always do better maybe in this area, because I took it as, if you're going to take the time to be that honest, it shows that you actually truly care about somebody's successes and failures. And you're not coming from a place of rudeness. You're coming actually from a place of love and caring. You want this person to succeed and be their best selves. And that was one of the things that I always enjoyed. I knew if you were ever in any of my presentations, if you were the moderator or there, the feedback you gave was like legit feedback, right? And if you listened to the criticism and truly absorbed it, you were going to be better for it on the back end. So thank you so much for bringing that up. People say brashness. I say it's actually greatness, right? When it comes to you. So we talked a little bit about your path. I didn't realize it was in 2016 that you ended up in Canada. So you got to Canada at the same time. I almost went the opposite direction and went back to Texas Tech. And I didn't realize that, because I knew you were at Northern Arizona. I knew you were there. And that's one of the things that I think what I like about hospitality is we always follow the great ones, right? You find where they're going with their career paths and stuff. But I didn't realize it was 2016. So moving to the next little piece of conversation, I call this section the review. And it's something that I give a guest an opportunity to maybe talk about something that they've recently come across. I've had guests mention books, mention maybe an inspirational speech or something. Has anything come across your purview lately that you just go, oh, this is something that I think is really important, people should know about? Or even if it's just something as trivial as, oh, I've never done something this way before, and now I have a new approach to doing something. Do you have anything that maybe a little jewel of information you could pass on to people in the review?
I do. I just want to say I'm clearly having a junior senior moment. It was 2018 that I came here. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I'm like, no, it wasn't 2016. That was the election that led to me exploring. But anyway, I digress. Yes. So I will say I've been talking about this for a few months now. So for those who don't know, in the U.S. And perhaps abroad, Queens is a preeminent, prestigious institution. It's an Ivy League institution. However, I, like Dave, I come from a working class background. I'm first generation. It's nuts and bolts, and you're right. I look at the world quite differently. I love academia, but I bring a business view mindset to academia. And so this is a pinnacle moment, frankly, in my career. You made me smile talking about, a young kid from New York City coming in and doing what you do. And it's not lost on me the importance of representation. When people see us, they recognize they can be us. And so the fact that such a prestigious institution as Queens would choose to appoint me as dean is groundbreaking. What you see here, not just in how I present to the world, but my perspective, my passion around equity, diversity, inclusion, and indigeneity, my perspective from a human resources professional background, and my willingness to focus on three key areas: transparency, equity, and fairness, has never been here in this package at Queens in its history. And it was founded in the 1800s, right? So this is groundbreaking, right? Not just me being here, but with the vision and passion I have, and recognizing the staunch traditions that exist here. A dear colleague of mine, Dr. Sarah Gardial, who happens to be the current dean at Belmont University in Nashville, right outside of Nashville, Tennessee. I was talking to her because she's someone like you, I have many mentors. People think that when you get to these roles, you no longer need a mentor. Actually, we get to these roles because we have mentors, right? Mm-hmm. And many of which are peer mentors. And she has been a godsend in my life since I was a junior faculty member at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And as I was talking to her about this transition to an elite business school, not just hospitality, but an elite business school, and what kinds of things I had to be thinking about. And this school is so large, it's what I call the Smith Enterprise, so a large entity as well. And I was talking about the stark traditions and the traditionalism that I would encounter here as someone who's quite entrepreneurial, who's like, let's go, let's make this happen, let's create this awesome experience for our students, and think intuitively around who we are, what we do, and the kind of product, I hate to think of it that way, but students are our product, the kind of graduates, the future leaders. At the end of the day, we're providers of talent. And I don't care if that talent is in for-profit, not-for-profit, government, we're creators of talent. Yeah. So we have to intentionally be thinking about what experiences do we want our students to have inside and outside the classroom that create this capacity for them to engage in a world that is now the most disruptive in humankind's history and existence, right? So she referred me to a text called Navigating the Future, and it is written by the former dean of the Duke Divinity School. So I always put a caveat that there is a bit of religion in there, but he's now the president at Belmont University.
Okay.
And he has this term called traditioned innovation. And what he's talking about is lots of time, people like you and I who are cutting edge, who are pushing the envelope, who's like, let's go, let's just try something new. Don't get stuck in the staid conventional ways of practice, which, let's be honest, that's academia, right?
Yeah.
You can't find a more bureaucratic, the only thing more bureaucratic is government and the military. That's it.
Well,
After
and you
that,
hit on something from there. Part of the reason I think we got to this point is because we're so innovative, creative, and pushing the envelope. But then you get here and they're like, whoa, this is the way we've always done it, right? It's such a conflict there. I didn't mean to interrupt, but you said that, and it resonated with me so much. But please continue.
I'm sure it's resonating with a lot of folks, not just academics, but people in different organizations. Organizations are wise enough to recognize you have to bring in different talent to shake things up and to move organizations forward. But when we do that, you applaud them because they recognize they need something different and they need that entity. But when they get there, they actually want you to conform. When they forget that, you have to remind them, you hired me because I did things differently, and you actually want to do things differently moving forward. But anyway, the key thing about this text is that it talks about traditions not being traditional. And those of us like you and I, we often want to throw out the traditions and say, get out of my face, like, come on already. You've been doing it this way for 100 years. Don't you think it's time to do something a little different, right? Or as I've been saying here at Smith, which is phenomenal. We are a phenomenal institution. We were just ranked #1 for our MBA, our full-time MBA in Bloomberg in Canada. I mean, we rock it, right? So we're really phenomenal. And we have a history. We're the oldest business school in Canada. We were the first business school in Canada. So you can think about the prestigious, intelligent, purely talented people I get to work with every single day. But we're grounded in these traditions. And as a result, we become traditional and we become less open to trying new things. And then innovators like us come in and go, throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't need those traditions. Let's just focus on the future. And what he's arguing is that institutions who are about change and who are about helping society must recognize that you just need to identify which of these traditions do you want to hold dear that will serve as a foundation for who you are. And as I say, a jumping off like a trampoline to the future of who you're going to be
Mhm.
in what you do. So it's both and. And so I'm in the process right now of strategic planning. And the reason I do the air quotes is it's not strategic planning in the traditional business approach, right? So we're starting with, wait for it, purpose. Why do we exist? Why are we here? What's our purpose? And so you can see the piece that likely has a little religion in it, right?
Yeah.
Why are you here?
Why are we
What
here?
are you designed to do? How are you contributing? But then you go to core values, and I use my alma mater, West Point, as an example. I'm an old grad. Coming up, this is the year of my 35th reunion. And so we did things quite differently when I was there in the 80s, right? We actually did haze people. I was a hazer. But with respect, because our goal was to develop leaders of integrity, but also leaders who had been forged under fire, right? Fire can make you strong. And so, but even in the 4 years I was there, the kinds of things we were able to do to incoming students, cadets, changed immensely. Like we couldn't treat them the way we'd been treated because West Point was starting to recognize that's actually probably not the best way to produce a great leader.
Mhm.
And they cared about leaders. And even the mission of the institution has shifted so much, a slight bit. It's now focused on leaders because it recognizes we don't all stay in the military, but we need leaders in the United States and across the globe. So that shifted a little bit, and we are that. So, but I can tell you this, our 3 core values, duty, honor, country, are the foundation for everything we do. So no matter what they change that I may or may not like, as long as we have that deep commitment to duty, honor, country, I'm good. So what are the core values organizations hold dear that they're going to latch onto? And then, of course, you get it. What you do could be anything. And of course, how you do that, the world is your oyster, as long as you're always going back to what's our purpose, what are our core values, and now how are we going to use those to have some positive impact on society in the future. And in my mind, certainly in the US and Canada, it's a slight difference because Canadians have a different expectation of the role of government here than we would in the United States. But most certainly this is a Wandaism. From my perspective, there's not a single social issue that gets addressed if business isn't engaged, because that's how it happens, right? If you think about you and I, we both have professional backgrounds. Where we are today doesn't happen if businesses don't wake up and recognize the value of different people from different backgrounds who are incredibly talented with unique competencies aren't provided opportunities to lead. We're not here.
Wow.
And our institutions don't benefit from that wisdom and experience. Well, business did that. Business did that, not the government. Business did that. The government provided a vehicle, but the actual implementation of change happens in business. And so for me, starting with our purpose, I say my dream for Smith is that we create a collaborative academic learning environment. And there's an edit here from my associate dean, Dr. Julian Barley, whose emphasis is in leadership, who are, here's his edit, respected for bringing their authentic selves to this building. Think about that.
I like that. See,
if we could do that as academic institutions, oh my God, what would happen, right? What kinds of experiences would students be having? What kind of historical barriers would we be tearing down? And not just in post-secondary, but across institutions, across society, right? That we would be helping students recognizing and challenging that perhaps their view of the world isn't the only view of the world, that not everyone is privileged, that there are different perspectives other than, Western thought that we might want to
That's
explore.
the hard part for people to absorb sometimes, that there's that other. And I had a conversation with my class yesterday. So we were talking about privilege and what people got to do and not do. And I mentioned that I was about 22 before I stepped foot on Disney property. for the first time ever. And you could see the look on some of their faces, just kind of that like, oh, and I said, and it happened because my wife, then my fiance, actually just my girlfriend then, I think we were just dating at the time. She said, hey, let's go to Disney, right? And I said, I didn't step foot on it till I was 22. Now my kids have a sense of privilege because they got to do it much sooner and much more often from there. But, growing up in the projects in New York, the idea of going to Disney World on a vacation, for us, a special vacation was going to our aunt and uncle's house in the South. It was always, what are you doing this summer? Oh, we're going down South to visit family, right? And then we stayed with them and slept on the couch and in the house. And that was vacation, hanging out in the backyard. For a New York City kid, that was vacation. So students hearing that different perspective is kind of like the oh, wow. So just to make sure that everybody remember, you said the name of the book is called Narrating the Future.
Navigating.
Navigating.
As a ship, navigating the future.
I might have to pick me up a copy of that. So thank you so much for sharing that. I really like that. But we also mentioned something else. We're both have our roots in hospitality. Even though now I'm a department chair for business administration, you are a dean at a prestigious institution, their business school. We're still hospitality at our roots. So I wanted to ask you this. This is more of a casual question. Have you been traveling? Have you done anything? Because I know you're very well traveled, and I remember hearing stories about you and your son taking vacations and doing different things. So are you still involved in that life? Have you been able to do it over the last 18 months or so with the pandemic and everything?
Yeah, unfortunately, Canada has responded to the pandemic quite differently than the U.S. We're not fully open, right? Our border with the U.S. did open in mid-August. We have opened our borders to other countries now, but it's interesting you say that because I literally was just talking to people last week and said, I have to confess that I think I'm a bit anxious, right? Because I haven't been on a plane in so long. And you're right. I used to be on a plane all the time. I mean, all the time. And in my role at McEwen, took 2-3 weeks to Asia. I've been this top I bought in Tanzania, having the opportunity to go to, as we like to refer to it as African Americans, the mother continent. Yeah. But I haven't done anything in 18 months. My last trip, believe it or not, was the AACSB Dean's Conference in February of 2020.
Oh, and wow.
So, yeah, we're just now starting to contemplate, and I'm in Ontario now, so I'm about 3 hours east of Toronto, and Toronto was our major hotspot in the country for the entire pandemic. So even those experiences are quite different. Normally, I would be spending several days a week in Toronto building those relationships, right? Mm-hmm. So the timing of your question is appropriate because I literally just said to folks, I think we have to schedule something this term, and maybe it's late next month, early November, where I go, maybe it's to Europe and can connect with some major cities where I will have not just our academic partners, but also alumni, and then members of our global council, so that we maximize my capacity to go to a few places and then come back. But we haven't done that yet, to be honest. I've still not been to the US in all this time. The good news is that one of the things I love about Kingston is I'm literally 40 minutes from the bridge to US. So I can't wait to get back to New York. I'm about an hour and a half, I think about 2 hours from Syracuse. So I could actually go watch a ball game. That'd be kind of cool. So very close to New York, 5 hours from the city. So, I'm like, hey, I can drive to the city, see a show. That's heaven on earth, right?
Oh, man, I tell you what, I hope you get those opportunities soon. And that's such a different experience than what I'm experiencing here in Florida, right? So,
yeah, well, my parents live in Florida, so we've had several conversations about what's happening in that state.
Being an HTM guy, hospitality, tourism management, it was, I remember, I still have the email that we got on March 12th of 2020. It's like, hey, by the way, don't come to work on Friday, March 13th. Give it a couple of weeks. We're going to have spring break. And next thing you know, we're shutting down. We're pulling students out of internships because they're closing down. And it just kind of went. And then all of a sudden, it was like, Florida's open. Come to Florida. And it was such a different feeling because I remember for 6 weeks there, walking around in downtown St. Augustine, it was like a ghost town.
Yes.
And then once they said we're good to go, you would have thought we were pre-pandemic with the number of people that just came, and it stayed that way. And even now, we are breaking 2019 records, not 2020. We're breaking 2019 records.
Wow.
We're talking 15 to 20% above 2019 revenue numbers, which is just unbelievable. Because I tell people we're still in a pandemic.
Yes.
People, just to let you know, we're still in a pandemic. But it's weird because some people act as if Florida, okay, we're good. Florida's open. Another state, my daughter lives in another, Texas.
Yes.
They're like, hey, come to Texas, right? So it's such a different feel than what you're giving, because people are out and about, and it feels that HTM is back and booming as normal here in the state of Florida.
Well, and we want that, right? We want that to happen. When New York opens, when Broadway opens, that's a sign, right? But Broadway is opening, I would argue, recognizing the health situation, right? With health and safety in mind, you have to be fully vaccinated to come. You're still wearing a mask. I'm blessed to serve on the board of Citadel Theater, which is in Edmonton, Alberta, very known as a progressive theater. We do amazing work. And we just made those decisions as well about fully vaccinated patrons, about making sure that everybody who's involved with the show, and even how we choose to do the food service aspect, the hospitality aspect of that experience. And we have to be sensitive to that. Now, I'm here in Kingston, and so we've had beautiful weather. We have patios. It's just absolutely gorgeous. We're on Lake Ontario. I was literally out kayaking on Sunday.
Oh, nice.
So it was just gorgeous. But we're still wearing masks. We're still wearing masks, right?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah,
still wearing my mask, right? And we're being very intentional. We were able to open up here in Kingston for all post-secondary. So we got a reprieve so we can have class, no physical distancing in the instructional space, everybody's masked, and we're requiring everyone to be vaccinated. That's a game changer for us. Students, we basically welcome 2 first years because our second year students had never been on campus.
Never been on campus, yeah.
Right?
Wow.
So we too are seeing a big boom. It's a bit different. It'll be a bit more challenging. We still have physical distancing in place. So you'll see plexiglass now in restaurants as we're trying to put as many people safely in that space as we can. And of course, for us, the weather's about to change. The weather doesn't really change in Florida, which is why I'm planning to probably come visit
still
you
hot as hell right now.
in Christmas, right? When we're in snow, I might be coming to visit my parents in Florida. But it is, I think, but we're back to this notion, I think, of responsibility and what are we trying to do, right? We want people to be together. I'm a sociologist, so we are social beings. We have a need to connect and build networks, but we must recognize that unless we do that safely, we'll never get out of the pandemic. And we will get out of this pandemic. I want to share that. I am 100% confident, but we can't rush through the pandemic. Like we actually have to do, science is amazing. We have to do what science has taught us. And here in Southern Ontario, because we are honoring that, we have very few cases, right?
Oh,
when people are fully vaccinated, when people are wearing their masks, what I've heard from our medical, we have a medical school. So what I've heard from our medical advisors is the number of cases exacerbate when you are indoors, unable to maintain physical distance, and are unmasked. So if you're going to be indoors and you can't maintain physical distance, you need to wear a mask, folks. It's just that simple. Now, the good news is if you're fully vaccinated, you can still obviously contract a virus. It's a virus, but you're not going to be in the hospital. You're not going to be on a ventilator, and it's not going to be tragic for you and your family. So people who, for whatever reason, refuse to acknowledge the value of science. I mean, we don't have people dying of all kinds of diseases anymore because of science. Right? Most of us who went to public school in the United States, I'm 58. You're significantly younger than me, but even you had to do this because my son did. You cannot go to public school in the United States, K through 12, without certain vaccinations. Right? There's a reason people aren't walking around and dying from measles and mumps. There's a reason for that, right? We eradicated it for all practical purposes. And we know what happens when we don't honor that, because I remember a few years ago in the US, we had a resurgence of measles. And I remember thinking, who has measles? And then you hear, oh, they're not vaccinated.
They're not vaccinated, that's right.
Hello, right? So again, I mean, I'm not making this a political statement. I'm merely saying we're blessed to have incredible scientists who can leverage their knowledge to help society live longer, healthier lives. Why would we not do that?
No, I agree with you there. And you've kind of touched on something in that last set. I tell you, you're a great guest. You always seem to say something that goes perfect into the next piece. So what we're dealing with here at Flagler is we have our mask mandate. We are a private institution. We haven't required the vaccination as of yet, but there have been incentives and those types of things. I think we're up to about 70% of the students have reported being vaccinated and submitted their vaccination documentation. We require masks in the classroom because they didn't want to. Some of our classrooms, it's just difficult to social distance, and we're trying to maintain our numbers. We actually had the biggest incoming class of students that Flagler has had probably in the last 10 years. And I think a big result of it is of what happened in 2020, where so many students were online, so many pushed back their acceptance. So you had talked about the steps that you're taking, and you're at Smith now, right? Queens
Correct.
was where you were before. You're at Smith
No,
now.
Queens. Smith is the name of the business school. Queens
The
is
business
the
school,
university.
Queens is a university. Okay, so you're at Queens, and my question to you is, in your opinion, do you think education now is changed forever as a result of this? And what are your thoughts on what do you think the things that are going to stay changed, and what do you think might try to make its way back to the way it was before?
Yeah, great question. I do think we've changed, and I would argue we needed to change, right? Now, I will say I'm very blessed that at Smith, they have been the leaders in remote delivery for over a decade, literally. If you were to come here, which I hope you do, I'll invite you here.
Man, I want to go visit because I
Yeah.
was so excited when I saw you were named the dean of the business school for a number of reasons. One, because I've known you for a long time, and I couldn't think of anybody that could do a better job. But two, as a person of color, being named dean of a business school, my thought was, it can be done, because there's so many people I know that are great people, but they don't look like me. They haven't come from my background. And even though we push past that and we're like, hey, okay, so we'll be the first, right? We'll blaze the trail. It's still nice to see somebody that can relate to some of the things that you've gone through. So if you're going through this, I know I can pick up the phone and be like, hey, Wanda, let me just bounce this off of you. So I was so excited from both of those standpoints. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just had to give you praise again for that, because I just think you're amazing. But
well, thank you for that. And I feel that as a distinct honor as well. I talk about this regularly here at Queens. Look, I'm the lonely only, and unfortunately, I'm always the lonely only, right? Until recently, an associate dean here left and is now a dean at another prestigious business school here. But until that happened, literally in July of this year, to my knowledge, I was the only Black woman dean of a business school in all of Canada. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy.
That is crazy.
We have one Black president. I know him because he was kind enough to extend his arm to me as a mentor. And he and I had this conversation around, look, I'm it. I said, well, I was going to ask you that. Like, are you seriously it? And it doesn't matter where he goes. If he's at a college, which here when we use college, it's like a community college or a university. He has been the only Black president of a university or a college in all of Canada. And he said, I take great pride that we were able to keep you in Canada, because I can't be the only one. Like, that's crazy, right? So to your point, Dave, representation matters, and we have to lift each other up, and we have to hold our institutions accountable to broaden. Here's a term I'm using here. We have to change how we assess who we believe has a right to teach and learn in Smith. And I would argue that's true across post-secondary higher education.
Mhm.
So one of the ways we've changed is with the unfortunate, painful, tragic death of George Floyd. For whatever reason, and I'm old enough to remind people, Rodney King, I'm just going to say it. He didn't die, but it was the same thing. That was in the 90s.
Dude,
We
it was
didn't
crazy.
learn from that either.
I remember that so vivid. You know, that memory is forever ingrained because there have been several of those type of events that have happened that would trigger my mom to not want to let me go out and play, to not want to
Absolutely.
let me go out with my friends. And I'm like, oh, we're all going. And she's like, yeah. So I was in New York during the
Trayvon
Central
Green.
Park situation, you know?
Yeah,
Central
Trayvon
Park
was
5.
my
Yeah.
son. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he literally looked like my son, who was out minding his own business, right? So one thing that's happened is that institutions again have recognized they have a responsibility to be engaged in what's happening in society. That's our responsibility, particularly in higher ed, post-secondary education. And as you've already heard me say, and I think business education has a responsibility to produce leaders who are more better informed about what's happening in society and across the globe. And I would argue we have an obligation to share different perspectives of the globe, not just our perspective. But the other ways in which we've changed is the delivery of education. Now, I'm old school and I'm an off the chart extrovert, just like you. So there's nothing that replaces for me being in a room with students. The buzz on campus is just phenomenal. I love it. I love it. However, you have identified and taken advantage of the pieces that we need to change. This is amazing. It's a great way to educate, share content in a way that's quite unique, and it reduces the barriers to entry.
Mhm.
You know, here at the sad truth is here at Smith, we have no Black faculty. You're looking at it.
Oh, wow.
I can't even wrap my head around that, right? It's 2021. We don't have any Black faculty. So we have to be intentional. We're not just going to go out and hire Black faculty. We're not going to lower, because that's what people think, right? Oh, we're not lowering our standards. Well, here's a news flash. We're not lowering our standards, but we're changing how we assess what is of value, right? That's what we're doing. And we also have to recognize and move from a deficit approach. And I'm one of those. I don't tick all the right boxes to be at an elite business school. You know, I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't go to Yale. I didn't go to Oxford. I didn't go to Queens. I didn't go to these prestigious institutions. And yet I possess experience, expertise, and competencies that have never existed on this campus. And so I'm actually adding value in a way that has never been considered before. So let's focus on value add versus the deficit approach, what I don't have, right? So that's one thing. But it also means that this medium now gives us a wide array of choices to make about who we allow into the classroom, because we can tap people from across the globe through this media, right? We can totally do this now. We can pre-record. So think about accessibility. It's one area of diversity that I tend to be less well-versed in and tend to forget about. Mm-hmm. But in the United States, I would imagine the data is the same. The data I have is old, but back a decade ago, people who had physical and mental challenges were the most underemployed in the United States, right? So again, now we're recognizing there's different approaches for accessibility to education, right? All of this. And then for a school like Smith that may not have certain representations, there's nothing that prevents us from identifying other faculty colleagues, prestigious and successful business leaders, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and having their voice in the classroom because we use this media now.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And that's something here at Flagler we're experimenting with in the future. So everybody went online, and some, our board of trustees and some of our upper level administrators, they're like, we're a face-to-face institution. So we kind of shifted right back to that. But there are so many faculty members who put together some amazing online class materials. And I said, well, what's up with the return on their investment? I said, man, they invested big chunks of their time. Where's the return on their investment with all of this technology we have available? Why take it all away? Why not still let them allow them to offer one class, even if it's online? So then maybe that frees them up a little bit to keep that good work-life balance, right? So instead of being in the class 4 different times through the week for 4 different classes, you eliminate one that could be done online. It frees up a little time. Our livelihoods have changed so much over these past 18 months. I even think about mine because I was kind of doing, all my classes were hybrids. So instead of meeting 3 days a week, we'd meet a couple of days a week. One time we'd have off. The next week we'd be online with different things 2 days a week. And then we'd meet one time to debrief. It allowed me to flip the classroom a little bit more. It just changed the way some people have flourished more through it. Some people are still having it, but it allowed me to see individual strengths and weaknesses, what opportunities existed out there. So thank you so much for sharing that, because the way I see it, education is so different. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to take it a step farther. So one of the things we have to think about is the shift in education from this. We need to be asking ourselves, why do students come to the classroom? What's the value add? So the basic mundane content, throw it on the web, create some lectures, have some mentor experience. But when they get in the classroom, let that be the real struggle, playing with experiential learning, bringing people in, solving real problems, so that our students actually apply and use the content they're learning to evaluate. I'm talking Boyer here.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we need to be doing, right? No, but seriously, this is what we need to do, because otherwise they don't. We have a term here that I've heard often: death by PowerPoint. Like that's not the cool thing anymore. So let's take the content that students, they're quite bright, they're quite talented, they're capable of learning. What stuff can they just read the text, go through some of that, and then show up to really put that into practice, or to focus on what didn't we understand? How do we go deeper? And that should allow us to deepen the learning to produce better qualified, again, talent for the world. That's our goal, right?
Yeah.
And I also like what you're saying about hybrid and really creating some flexibility. And even in McEwen, I was thinking about this, because it too was, hey, we were passionate about the relationship we built with our students. My greatest pride was my students knew I was their dean. Mm-hmm. That meant the world to me. Like they could say hi to me in the hallways and could see me out and about, right? So we don't want to lose that. But let's admit that there are communities and neighborhoods that don't have access to education. And why wouldn't we bundle this knowledge in a particular credential and offer it online? So I was talking to my colleagues and saying, why wouldn't we offer the business management and accounting, those 2 diplomas, which is like an AA or an AS in the US, and the management major online? And that way, many of our Indigenous communities in Canada are to the north. Newsflash, they actually don't want to come to the big city to get educated. They actually rather stay on their communities, right? Mm-hmm. And how powerful would it be that they could get this learning in new and creative and different ways, live streaming, which would force us as a country to ensure that they had access to broadband, right? And said that they could be educated. And think what could happen. What they were learning, they could actually leave out the door and start implementing in their community. Isn't that what we're trying to do? Yeah. So I think, to your point, it allows us to shift and go deeper and broader in the educational context.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. And that kind of takes me into another little piece. You're talking about faculty and broadening or extending their scope. But the piece I want to focus on is faculty, because now you're the dean, right? You're essentially the front desk of the hotel. All the problems are going to kind of end up there. What are some things that you're doing to help faculty deal with just this weird, unprecedented times. I know some of the things that I've done is, they've been really good here at Flagler. They're like, you're the department chair, you manage your department how you see fit. A lot of departments are mandating their faculty to still maintain face-to-face office hours in their offices. And the first thing I did is I told faculty, I said, have office hours the way you feel most comfortable. So if you're not feeling comfortable sitting in an office and you still want to do it virtually, but you're in your office, that's cool. If you want to do it from your house, that's cool. I said, we have all of these tools. So that was one thing that you could see, just the level of anxiety that, okay, I don't have to be sitting. I have a small office. What are some of the things that you have done as dean to help with the mental well-being of, I guess, not even just faculty, but students, staff? Because everybody looks to the dean to fix the problems. I don't have an answer. Let me ask the dean. What are some of the things you're doing there to just help people at your institution?
That's a great question, and it's critical. And I'll start because pandemic at McEwen. And what I found, and I find the same thing here at Smith, faculty are so committed and dedicated to their students and to their students' learning and to their academic success that my faculty colleagues were investing tremendous amounts of time and energy, as you just said, to creating all this material and online content. But they were doing it from the perspective of, oh my gosh, it's got to be an A+, it's got to be exceptional, it's got to be Oscar worthy, right? Having just had the Emmys, it's got to be Oscar worthy. And I said to them, folks, take it down a notch, right? The expectations are different. I did not require people to teach synchronous, although most chose to do so. I did not require people to have everything online and have it be beautiful. I also created opportunities for our faculty colleagues who had already been teaching online and had been using, like yourself, a hybrid course, and were quite well versed in all these different types of resources and technology. We did peer training sessions, and we talked about best practices and what's working and what isn't. And the surprise for me was last year, some faculty actually had the courage to say, I have to say, I actually had a great time teaching this way. And some of my students actually loved it. Now, we don't want that to be the only mechanism, right? Because face-to-face instruction has a unique value. But this notion of what needs to be taught in the classroom and what doesn't is really critical. I think it's also incumbent upon academic leaders to relieve the stress of expectation. That's the issue. And then, of course, research. I'm now at a very heavy research R1 institution. McEwen was teaching oriented, but we still had a requirement for high quality research. So this comfort with, folks, obviously your research is going to slow down. It doesn't need to stop because there's all kinds of things we're doing right now that we should be collecting data about and we can publish on, especially at a teaching institution. At a research institution, many of the grants that people secured got extensions. We even talked about conversations about expectations for productivity during this time when you're really focused on teaching. We have to make those adjustments. Many universities also extended the tenure clock for faculty, taking into consideration the lack of ability to focus that much on research when you're really trying to do your primary. We call it teaching, research, and service for a reason, right? Yeah. And it starts with the teaching. And as you know, we infuse our research in our teaching, which informs our service, right? So that's some of the things we've done. But I will say I was an advocate at McEwen because we had spent so much time, rightly so, we had spent so much time focused on supports for our students. And I started to say, what about our faculty? I'm concerned about my faculty colleagues and then our staff colleagues as well, who are equally stressed working from home with, oh, by the way, also teaching their kids while they're teaching adult learners. I mean, it was just over the top, right? And then I'm sure you recognize as well, the pandemic more negatively impacted women and people of color, right? Well, so again, we're still having the same issues around responsibilities, domestic labor, accountabilities, and then this added burden of trying to make sure your children are okay for those who have children and responsibilities. And we were already in a situation where many faculty were part of the sandwich generation, where they were also taking care of their parents as well as their children.
Yeah.
So now in a pandemic, now you're really concerned around your parent who may be in a senior living community, and all the concerns around that and their health and safety. So it's just been a really difficult time for everyone to address the mental health. I will say here in Canada, lots of support for that, major organization support for that, and just a recognition of it's okay to talk about this now.
Yeah, and that's the thing I like. And I think since I've been named department chair, and you might even be able to attest to this as a person of color, I've noticed the faculty that are people of color and women, they're in my office a lot more than they were with the previous chair, because that level of understanding. I also am married. I have 4 children, even though my children are at a different stage. You know, my oldest is about to be 21 and a senior in college, and my youngest is a freshman in high school, and my 2 boys are sandwiched in between. I have some faculty members that have children that are just starting their educational, you know, a kindergartner and a preschooler. But I found that they have been very comfortable coming into my office since I've been appointed, because I understand. And I even actually called out one faculty member in a good way. I said, why are you sending out emails at 2:30 in the morning? Right? I was like, why are you sending out an email at 2:30 in the morning? I was like, there's nothing we do that is so groundbreaking that I can't wait till the next day or the day after for a conversation. And she said, that's the only time I had time to get on the computer, you know, because I'm taking care of my kids. I'm working from home. They're trying to do school. And, you know, let me rephrase. If I never asked the question, why are you sending me an email at 2 o'clock in the morning, pump those brakes, she felt that in order to still be considered equal to some of the other faculty, she had to do that. She had to show that she was willing to do whatever it took. And my concern was, if she continued down that path, doing whatever she thought she had to stay in that conversation, she would eventually go, I don't want to be in a conversation at that place, and go somewhere else. And it's really made me change the way I look at what we do as educators, my position, what other faculty are doing. And a lot of other faculty have banded together. We're trying to push the online education piece for targeted classes. I know my cost control students liked it better in the hybrid style. So instead of meeting every class and we're working through problems, they liked that I did a 10, 15-minute instructional video, that it was just out there and they could watch it over and over again with homeworks. And once a week for 30 minutes was a video and live synchronous, and I'm here. Or I said, if we want to meet in the class, I'll be in the classroom at this time for whoever wants to come. If not, I'll Zoom out. And they go, oh, this was so much more. Like, they said their anxiety was down. And I said, why was your anxiety so high? And they said they were worried about getting the answer wrong in front of everybody, right? And also, you know, they're wearing masks in class and that kind of stuff. It really changed the way I looked at what we're doing as educators. And you brought up a lot of good points as well. One other question I have for you as we kind of start getting towards the end of our broadcast in this Lessons from a Lifelong Learner. What are some of the things you did to keep yourself mentally fresh and trying to be Wanda, right? And when I say be Wanda, you were always that lifelong learner, always looking at new, interesting, innovative, creative things. My thing was I started this podcast, right? So I started a podcast, talking to people, connecting with people. What were some of the things that you did to stay fresh, to keep you down that path where you didn't feel that you were just so bogged down that you just couldn't do it anymore?
Yeah, great question. I would say the first thing for me, even in the frozen tundra of Edmonton, I love the outdoors. And for me, it allowed me, it forced me to. I was doing this already, but it really made it imperative that I be outside, even in frigid temperatures. So getting bundled up, going for my walks, releasing those endorphins, right? I was fortunate that Alberta is a very sunny province, even though it's frigid. So you could go outside and get that vitamin D.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is I was very blessed to be tapped to be a guest, what do they call me? A guest business contributor to a morning show on CBC radio in Edmonton. as the business consultant.
That is awesome. That is so
And
cool.
so it really, I mean, every week I'd meet with the producer and we'd say, okay, one, it was in real time. So it was what's happening this week with the pandemic and how does that relate to your area of expertise and how do we help regular businesses? Because you can imagine lots of people lost their jobs, unfortunately. Lots of small, medium businesses closed their doors and had to pivot. So we spent a lot of time talking about entrepreneurship. We spent a lot of time talking about, okay, if right here, right now, you can't do what you're used to doing, what educational avenues are out there? What podcasts, what MOOCs can you be learning from? And then, of course, we had some big challenges here in Canada around indigeneity and some awareness experiences that we had that you wanted to hear, well, what do we do with this knowledge now as business people? And how does business respond? And what do people do who've lost their lives, lost their jobs? So it really forced me to begin thinking about, one, business differently, but also business education. And now I'm thinking about here at Smith, what kinds of things, we're an elite business school, my goodness, the talent that exists in this building is unbelievable. But how do we take some of that talent and position some of our content for the average person, for the supervisor who's here in Kingston who wants to move into management, for the entrepreneur who's running a storefront and has a challenge and needs some extra knowledge to move to the next level, to grow, to leverage maybe online experiences for their customers, right? So these are the things that I think we have to do as business. Is as a leader, I have to figure out how do I build these connections in the community. And I'll leave with this. In my mind, this is no longer about corporate social responsibility. I'm talking about what does it mean for a business to be part of the community, and not just because, oh, I employ X number of people, but I mean really engaged and to employ its resources for the betterment of the communities in which they operate. And we at business schools have, I believe, again, an obligation and responsibility to partner with the community, the town and gown, to partner with them to say, here is some access. How do we work together? How can we help our community be even stronger than it is? And for economic sustainability. But here's the challenging part. I happen to live in a part of Southern Ontario that is not particularly diverse. Right, in terms of demographic composition. And yet the institution, Queen's University, is working really hard to embrace and recognize that a wider array of perspectives is of intense value and is moving in those directions in all kinds of ways. But as I keep talking to people, recruitment is fairly easy. Retention is the more difficult part.
Yeah,
and it
once
can't
you get
just
them, how do
be,
you keep them? Yeah.
It can't just be on this campus. We don't spend, thankfully, we do spend a lot of hours here, but I live in Kingston. And what we have to now be willing to do as a university is to partner with the community to educate and bring awareness to some of the experiences folks who come from different backgrounds are having in their day-to-day lives. Comments that are happening to them where they're at Starbucks, comments they're overhearing when they're in a restaurant having dinner, how they're treated in the grocery store, because that is going to have, believe it or not, an even greater influence on our ability to retain this top talent that has different backgrounds and experiences. So the other piece that I focused on was what kinds of things can we be doing? And again, this is probably a little odd to be thinking about it in either business or post-secondary higher ed. I want to create community, not an environment. Yeah. I want to create community. That's very different, right? And so for me, that's how I got to these texts. That's how I started reading these books. Another book I read this summer that changed my world was Untamed.
Untamed.
Glennon Doyle, I think it is. Glennon Doyle, Untamed. Great book for women. Not that men can't read it, but really, it's a release for women from these preconceived social norms of what we're supposed to be doing and focusing on, again, what is our purpose and how do we add value to society. So those two books really started shaping and allowing me to stop doubting, to stop, because people think, oh, you're successful, you don't doubt. Of course I doubt. Yes, I do. And also that notion of what am I supposed to do? You know, my executive coach says, you know what to do, go do it, right? But we have all these caveats. Oh, if I do that, so-and-so's not. No, live fully your authentic life and be genuine about where you're going and who you are. And frankly, the rest has to go by the wayside. Everybody's not going to like me. That's okay. But everyone will fully understand who I am, what I stand for, and what we're here to do. And that, quite frankly, is what we're about.
Oh man, thank you so much. A lot of gems there, a lot of gems. So here, as we wrap up, I like to give people a chance to speak on 30 seconds to a minute. It's called the Rant and Rave with Dave. If you just want to give us your final thoughts on anything that you want to share with us as an audience, we'd love to hear what you have to say, Wanda.
So after this, I'm going to be a member of a panel on an event called Dive In here in Canada, which is an insurance company, a group of companies that is talking about allyship. And one of the reasons we're having this is because people think that in light of George Floyd's tragic death, that saying that they got you, I'm with you, that is not allyship. Allyship is actually showing up and stepping up and calling out behavior that you know is inappropriate. It's not standing by the wayside. And I get for many people, this is uncomfortable. But if you're really going to be my ally, you got to have my back. You have to stand up. You have to call out racism. And it's systemic. And you can't rely on us to educate you. There's plenty of information out there. Get informed, get engaged, and show up for us.
Thank you so much for that, Wanda. I really appreciate having you today. I tell you what, I'm so glad I reached out, and I'm glad you were available. It's almost like old times, sitting around at a Southeast Cree meeting, just chit-chatting and over lunch right before everybody leaves after that day and a half at the conference. I wish you the best. I congratulate you on your success, and thank you for being such an inspiration, not just to myself, but I know there's so many students that are, one in particular, and I hope you don't mind I make mention of this, but I think you had a student, I think her name was Dr. Lori Tuma.
Oh, yes.
So the reason I bring it up is that jumps out of your LinkedIn page. That's one of the first things that jumps out on your LinkedIn page. And to me, it's a testament to who you are as an individual, because they remember you when they were graduate students. They remember you and what you did for them then. They're going to remember, and I remember you, even though now I'm in a different place in life. I remember all the things that you did for me when I was an up-and-coming student and what you represent to me now as a professional. So I just want to thank you so much for everything you do. And I know there's a lot of people that appreciate you. And I just thank you so much. Thank you for being on the show. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much for that, Dave. That just touched me deeply. And it's my greatest pride that my students reach out and say that I had a little bit of impact on them. So thank you for that. That means the world to me. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And everybody who had tuned in, please go ahead and share this video. A lot of great information on it. Next week, we're going to be taking a little break. There won't be a show. But after that, I'm going to be reaching out, having several people from several different areas. One is a young man who has goals to be president of the United States. I first met him when he was a student at East Carolina. He has since been a teacher. He was a drum major, worked with Merrill Lynch, worked in Washington, D.C. And I tell you what, if he runs for president, he definitely has my vote. So be looking for those coming up in the next few weeks. And again, Dr. Costen, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great week.